Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Will Baggett, Chief Development Officer at Emerging Executives, serving rising leaders in college athletics and beyond. Is your personal brand a reflection of your leadership potential? Well, look no further than our Executive Image Workshop, which has helped thousands master the art of professional presence, and we can do the same for your staff and student athletes. For more information, visit us on the web at www.execimage.org.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is JP Abercrumbie. JP is the Assistant Athletics Director for Student Athlete Development at Rice University. Greetings, JP. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Ty. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you on. Now, you've been in college athletics for a little under a decade. You spent some time at Mississippi State and at Cal before going to Rice. And what I know about you in terms of discussions we've had is that your role of Assistant AD for Student Athlete Development, you take a different approach than what you've seen before. I don't know if it's unique, but it's definitely, you try to take it and do it the way it's allowed to be done there at Rice, working under Joe there. Can you give us a little bit about the framework to how you approach your position in student athlete development?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I do is based on my own experience as a student athlete and just the things that I got to see, the opportunities that I was able to seize while learning how to become the person that I am today, the professional that I am today. I think it started with a love of student development, wanting to help people, but really realizing that intercollegiate athletics was kind of split with internal and external operations. And so for me, I've always figured out or tried to figure out how I could lessen that gap or build bridges between the internal and external side. I think when we talk about the student athlete experience or we think about holistic development, it can't just be focused on internal operations or on student affairs. It's really about how do we leverage both the internal and external assets to make the best student athlete experience possible. And so that's where, although I may be housed on the internal side, I've had several experiences in my past and even opportunities that I've been able to continue today in my current role that would kind of bridge the gap between internal and external operations, all with the idea of how to create the best student athlete experience.
Yeah, that's excellent, right? Bridging the gap between those two is excellent for you and your career, but it's also excellent for the student athletes and probably excellent for those on the external side to be involved with the student athletes, as they are not usually involved with student athletes. Talk to me a little bit about how you involve the other areas of the department to ensure what you're doing with student athletes.
Yeah, I think there are a couple ways to think about that. Some are informal, some are formal. So more on the informal side, I think this stems from the relationships that I'm able to create with my colleagues. We have this thing here at Rice. It's a hashtag team scheme. So it's a group of people who work both on internal and external sides. So maybe your academic support, your compliance, your student development folks, bridging the gap with sports medicine, but then also marketing, communications, facilities. Probably a group of about 8 to 10 of us who get together every now and then and just throw ideas off the wall. Sometimes they stick. Sometimes people want to run with something. It could be anything from how do we celebrate a team's or coach's birthday or a team's recent championship to, hey, we're trying to boost student attendance at this game. What are some ideas that you guys see on the internal side or that you see is going on campus that we could leverage to help increase this support in this area? So I think that's one of the informal channels we have. On the formal side, I know Joe Colgard, my athletic director, was on the podcast not too long ago. And he mentioned the WHO, so the Workplace Happiness Objective, and that's a collection of people from different areas within the department that serves as more of a formal capacity to ensure happiness within our workplace, ensure that as a staff we're taking care of each other so that we can provide the best student athlete experience possible. So yeah, we may do things like oversee what happens at our all staff meetings, but I think it goes a little bit further than that in terms of boosting staff morale. Starts with our onboarding process, making sure that people can be brought or welcome in to our community in the right way. But then also things like a couple times of the year, making sure that we just get together to fellowship and celebrate each other and make sure that we're building relationships across our department to support what we do on a daily basis.
So looking at the last thing you said, the formal things, onboarding, do they say, okay, we've hired this person, they'll be coming on this day, let's get together and figure, like, tell me about the structure of that? Like, tell me about how that works to make somebody comfortable when they actually arrive and get accustomed to the culture there at Rice.
Yeah, it's been a moving target, I'll say that. I haven't been at Rice too long, just a little bit more than a year. But even from the moment when I was hired, there was this opportunity for the WHO to welcome, to kind of serve as the pulse of the culture of our department and really welcome in that staff member. So maybe it's a card on your desk when you arrive, as well as some items that say welcome to the Rice family, maybe some gear. That's always helpful to make sure you can look the part. But then also connecting you with people who can serve as a network of support should you have any questions. Maybe some of them are in your department or in your reporting line structure, but then also people outside of that. So I know when I got here, I was welcomed by somebody who was in our development staff. I also had someone from football ops. And some other coaching staff be there on day one. I also had someone from our business office take me around campus, make sure I got to see things and then kind of handle more of the HR pieces. But it's more about what are we doing to set that person up for success from the beginning.
So it's not just your direct supervisors, people from all over the office trying to make you comfortable as you arrive on campus.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty cool. Now, you mentioned some of the informal things you're doing. Give us a couple of examples. You told us some of the examples of things you meet about. How do we celebrate a coach's birthday, or how do we do other sorts of things? Are there any hard examples you can give me from the little over a year that you've been there, Rice?
Well, so Team Scheme, again, it's about a creative, free flow and exchange of ideas. I think one of the best things about it is just having people from different perspectives and different backgrounds being willing to talk to each other. I have this informal rule that I think our department has embraced pretty well, that if you walk by my office door and the light is on, the door is open, that you at least have to acknowledge my presence. And so being able to kind of establish that culture to make sure that we're all being active participants in our department, that extends beyond student athlete development, and making sure that as we walk down the hallways, we're saying hi to each other, really cultivating that culture of care that we want for our students, but doing it as a department and modeling the way. So it can look like a lot of different things and maybe relationship driven, but I think that's essentially what college athletics is at the end of the day.
So what we've discussed so far are some of the things that help create and maintain the culture there at Rice in the athletics department, which allows you and allows everybody actually to create the experience for or create a great experience for the student athletes. Talk to me about some of the things you actually do with the student athletes in terms of development, in terms of making it so they have a great experience at Rice.
Well, on the day-to-day, my office, my job oversees the personal and professional growth initiatives for our student athletes. And I think it's really easy to look at that from maybe an academic lens or from a student affairs lens. But again, for me, it's about bridging those gaps. So it's how can I get our marketing department involved in the way that we tell our story of our student athlete experience, or in training them to do so. We have a great external staff with great tools at their disposal for how they help our students tell their story, but how can I provide a space for them to share their expertise? So, for example, in the summer, we've done some communications training, media training, social branding training. That wasn't just me operating in a silo by myself. It was with the help of our communications and marketing team. Or when we talk about development, advancement, and just fundraising, how do we close the gap between our current and former student athletes so that they understand, that our current student athletes understand the value of their scholarship or the amount of support that people are willing to pour into them, maybe even people who don't have an affinity or direct connection to Rice University as a whole, but they understand where our mission is, what our vision is for the student athlete experience, and have bought in. So how can I use the platform that I have or the gateways that I have with all of our teams to meet them where their needs are, but then also better educate them about the world around them?
Do you bring the other departments, the marketing or development or anybody else on campus, into planning meetings, or do you put something together and present it to them and say, this is where we'd like you to be involved? Or like, how involved are these other areas on campus in terms of what you're talking about with the student athlete experience? Like, are they from the beginning, or tell me about how you bring them on?
From the beginning, I'm a very collaborative person by nature. Collaboration is actually one of the things that I value. And I remember going back to the interview process here, I had to cast a vision for what I saw as being the student athlete experience, or the ideal student athlete experience here. And when I think about that, for me, it's about what the university offers. If we think about a recruiting process, The only way that a student athlete experience differs from whatever rival institution or the other institution that's also recruiting that student is by the resources, by the value of the degree, by what that institution provides. So as much as I can bridge the gap between the athletic and general student experiences, that's what I strive to do. For me, I think there's a level of understanding that differs in access and accessibility. By virtue of being students on this campus, our student athletes have access to all of the resources that the general student body population may have. But are those resources truly accessible to them? Are they at times or in locations that are feasible for them to get to? Do they know how to access them in the same way that their student peers may do that? And so for some of those answers to those questions, it wasn't this clear-cut answer. And I think when I think about the Center for Career Development, our Office of Student Success Initiatives, Multicultural Affairs, International Students and Scholars, the list can kind of go on and on there. For me, it was about how do I provide greater access and accessibility of those resources, and that starts in the planning process. So for example, we had an event last year called the Men of Color Black Student Athlete Luncheon. It was an opportunity for us to bring in Black male alumni who had various experiences here from various backgrounds academically and socially, and serve on a panel with a luncheon for our current student athletes. So that gave them an opportunity to share their story, share their experience. That was a collaboration with our Office of Alumni Relations and a little bit of our Office of Multicultural Affairs as well. But because of those relationships, we were able to not only find the alumni, bring them in, but provide an opportunity for our student athletes that were on par with those of our general student body as well.
Now, JP, what I found, all the things you're saying to me are very interesting. It sounds like you're doing a great job there. What I found around the country is football is always something hard to get people involved with, or even beyond football, just coaches, right? No matter what sport. A lot of times, some coaches buy into it, some coaches don't. I think you there at Rice probably are involved with all the sports. Tell me about developing a relationship with coaches, getting them to understand the value of this, and then really specifically football there. The coach has probably been there just as long as you've been there, right? Year and a half or something like that.
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to come in shortly after Coach Bloom. And so that's a unique opportunity too, where, he's trusting the rest of our staff to bring in somebody who fits the mold of what he's trying to do. For me, I think the simple answer to your original question is just relationships. I started November 1st, and so we're in the middle of a football season. And the way that I helped build relationships or even that comfort level with football was being present. I remember within the first week on the job, I was at practice. I was visible. I was taking notes. I was watching just to see what goes on, and not from an X's and O's standpoint, but maybe from a communication standpoint, from an adversity standpoint. How do the guys respond to each other? How do they respond to their coaches? And really just being a presence to help break down any barriers of feeling comfortable about me being around and being able to be an advocate and a resource. So I do get to work with all 16 sports here. And how do I build those relationships with them? Again, it's about being present, being visible, being accessible. I also think back to my first day here, and I know we had a men's and women's basketball game that day. So I wasn't knocking down the coaching staff's door that day. I wanted to see and support them in their games. But, do they see me in other spaces, or do I stay in my office? Am I willing to communicate with them as much as I want them to communicate with me? So I think for me, it's a big part of modeling the way or embodying what you want to see from others and kind of setting that expectation for them that way.
When I had Joe on, as you mentioned, he talked about the leadership aspect of people down the line, right? From executive leadership, senior leadership, junior leadership, entry-level leadership, and those type of things. Tell me how you've experienced that being there at Rice, working in that type of organizational culture.
I am very thankful for it. Joe's leadership, Stacey Mosley, she's our SWA who hired me, great leaders directly above me, but then also the people across from me. I think if I think back on my short tenure here, just one of the examples of what Joe was talking about was him elevating me to his senior staff. So he clearly sees something in me where I wasn't in that room when I first got here, but through the work that I've done, the relationships that I've been able to build, and maybe even just the general value, I think might be the right word, that I add to the organization, I'm able to now provide a perspective that wasn't in the room. So I'm very thankful for him to give me that opportunity and the trust in what I'm bringing to the room to say that it's worth being there.
All right, excellent. I'm sure that's something you'll take with you for the rest of your career. JP, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Ty.
That was JP Abercrumbie. She's the Assistant Athletics Director for Student Athlete Development at Rice University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.